seen anything like that?
I'm a very confident front runner. I've caddied for 33 years, 145 wins now, and that's the best win I've ever had.
I have no idea what you have.
I don't know. How are we going to count all the shots? I can't keep track.
Fuck! God damn it.
I don't think he's pleased.
Of course you would. That's a particularly stupid question. It's the Irish Open. Of course you want to play at the weekend.
Well, that theme song can only mean one thing. Radio goodness is coming your way. We're talking golf, and we've got Shane Ryan, author of Slaying the Tiger, on the line. Evening, Shane.
Hey, how you doing, guys?
Very well. So you were at Hilton Head over the weekend, the Heritage taking place. Webb Simpson emerged victorious. Top 5 player in the world right now, Webb Simpson, but not really the main story of the weekend, which was Nick Watney, who ended up testing positive for COVID-19, the first PGA Tour player to do just that, and a lot of what-ifs afterwards, it seems, as to whether correct protocols have been followed and whether the protocols they have are correct in the first place. What was your view on it all?
Yeah, I was driving down on Friday, and it was funny because my stepfather loves Nick Watney because Nick Watney was nice to him one time at a tournament when he talked to him, and he was texting me about Nick Watney. He was saying, make sure you talk to him, make sure you get in with him, and then a second later said, Nick Watney's gone with COVID. And I thought for sure he must be joking because he's obsessed with Nick Watney or whatever. But of course, as it turned out, he did have it. It was really strange. I got in Friday night, and the vibe was on Saturday, from what I was told, even a lot different than it had been on Friday. Players were worried. There were rumors going around that maybe, a lot of players have been doing a good job social distancing, but some others hadn't. Maybe some had gone out to places that they shouldn't have, and things like that. But for me, the biggest mystery was that, my wife is in healthcare, and anybody who has even done a little research knows that you're not going to test positive until you've had it for a little while in most cases. And so, it may be 4 or 5 days, and it can be even longer before a positive test will show up. So Nick Watney, to his credit, felt a little funny, and I guess, some device he was wearing on his wrist told him that he might be at risk. So he got tested. He tested positive, and then they did this thing called contact tracing, where they found the 11 people that were sort of, in closest contact with him. They tested them all on Friday night, just after Watney had been tested positive, and they got 11 negative tests. Well, that's fine, except that if Watney did infect those people, they wouldn't have tested positive yet anyway. And the great irony of it is that we know with coronavirus, you can still spread the disease long before you're symptomatic and long before you test positive. So it raises the question, what good is a test like that? So there's a lot to consider. The PGA Tour, I think, is doing as much as they can to keep it safe, but there are certain aspects of this disease which are almost, like test proof in a way.
I know today I got an email from the European Tour about potentially covering the events in the UK over the next few weeks, and that if you want to go as a journalist, you basically need to move into the European Tour's bubble, as they call it, whereby you have to stay in the official hotel. You can't eat anywhere else except for the official hotel, and you can't come into contact with anybody else. No taxis, no buses, nothing like that. While you're covering the tournament, you only come into contact with the people and the players and whoever else within that hotel for contact tracing. Is that the case on the PGA Tour, or can players come and go as they please?
So for media, I believe this coming week they're going to start testing them. But this week we weren't even tested. We would do when media came in, we would do a body scan, a thermal body scan, and they would say, how are you feeling? Has anything changed? And but the idea is that we can't talk to the players. We can't be around them. So it's okay that we're really not being tested. Because we're not going up to players and chatting with them like you normally would. For the players themselves, they give them the option of taking charter flights into the tournament. They give them hotel options, but it's not like over there. I don't know if you've read anything about the NBA, where they're literally going to keep these guys in a very tight bubble where they're all in the same hotels, they're all in the same things. If they go out to dinner, they go out together to a closed restaurant. It's not like that in the PGA Tour. Nothing is stopping, Ryan Palmer from going to a nightclub and clubbing all night. I don't think that happened. I don't think that's Palmer's beat. But really, they can't do anything. They can't tell them where to stay. Some of them are staying in private homes. They're not staying in hotels. So, they talk about this bubble, but really, it's up to each player how they get there and what they do once they're there.
Because Justin Thomas made the comments over the weekend that Hilton Head. I'm not sure what type of area it is, but that it was like a zoo, that every pub, every bar, every restaurant you went into was absolutely packed. There was no social distancing. There was nobody wearing masks. And that for the PGA Tour to be there and for their players to be around is putting them at huge risk. Have you changed? Did you notice a change in attitude as the week went on from the players to the procedures that are in place? Because obviously we saw Rory McIlroy last week questioning why some of the Europeans hadn't come over, that this is their job, this is their livelihood, they should be there. And I think a lot of them probably quite smug this weekend that they're not there.
Yeah, I don't think that quote from Rory is going to age well. And you guys know I like Rory quite a bit, but I don't think that was a good comment from him. And I think it's going to look worse as time goes on. I don't know how familiar your Irish listeners are with geography and culture of America, but the American Southeast is one of the most backward, ignorant places probably that exists in the Western world. And I live here, so I think I can say that, even though I'm from the North, so they would probably tell me I can't. But what's happening is all these states are opening up, and South Carolina is one of them. And you'll be shocked to know that when they opened up and let people go back out in public, the coronavirus cases spiked. And a lot of these places, including South Carolina, are showing more higher cases than even what it was at the worst times. So, yeah, unfortunately, Justin Thomas was exactly right. Hilton Head's a zoo. We have people in this country who think that wearing a mask is a liberal political statement. So this is what we're dealing with. But to get to your question, yeah, I think things did change a little bit. Webb Simpson even had a comment about he had been cautious and he had been social distancing, but he was going to even take it a little more seriously, whatever that meant. And there were a few people who said that, of course, the Nick Watney test, it's not that they didn't expect a positive test to happen. They always knew it was going to. But the reality of it is different than saying, oh, yeah, we knew this was going to happen. The reality of it can't help but be jarring. And, in the best case scenario, it's one of those things that changes people's behavior for the positive. And hopefully Watney's okay. And it ends up being maybe a good thing that taught us a necessary lesson.
With a situation like this and Nick Watney's, there can be a lot of rumour. And quite often, as usual with the PGA Tour, they don't have an awful lot to say about any sort of controversy or anything out of the ordinary. And the rumours at the time were that he woke up in the morning not feeling well, was tested, but then went to the course anyways, was on the putting green with the likes of Rory McIlroy and Brooks Koepka, and before he teed off was told that he had tested positive. Is that your understanding of what happened?
Yeah, loosely, that's my understanding. He wasn't feeling great, and also he had this device called a Whoop, WHOOP, on his wrist that, I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially it measures your body temperature at night and your heart rate. And if it goes up by a certain amount, it can give you a heads up that something might be, illness might be imminent or something. And so that apparently gave him, triggered an alarm or something. And so he did get tested. But yeah, he was at the course. It was funny.
Surely he shouldn't have gone to the course if he didn't feel well.
Exactly. But here's the problem, and Ryan Palmer is somebody who joked about it, but there's truth in every jest. Palmer was somebody who was contending for the lead after Saturday and who planned to go home on the charter flight. Now, if you don't go home on the charter flight, you don't have to take a second COVID test. So he was joking, saying that I almost decided to go home a different way so that I wouldn't have to get tested in case I was positive, because I want to go and try to win the tournament tomorrow. And if I was positive, they wouldn't let me play. And so, yeah, there are some perverse incentives. Like I don't know exactly Watney's case, so I can't comment on that, but it's not a huge leap of the imagination to say, gee, if somebody's in contention or can make a little bit money, they may ignore a little sore throat or whatever the case may be. When, of course, as you said, for the good of everybody else, they shouldn't ignore that. They shouldn't go to the course.
Look, maybe what happens on the PGA Tour is a reflection of American society's attitude to COVID-19, but even watching the players over the last couple of weeks and the eyes of the world on them, but very little social distancing, lots of high fives at the end of rounds, the odd fist pump, but some of them still go for the high five. It just seems like such a bizarrely relaxed attitude.
Yeah, it's tough, and I will say, even for somebody like me who is trying to take every precaution and takes it very seriously, if you're there all the time in the media center or with other people, it's very hard to be on your game 100% of the time. Like all of a sudden, I'll go to a restroom and leave and realize, I didn't wear my mask the whole time I was in that bathroom. Like, that's probably something your listeners didn't want to know. But little things like that you go, gosh, I've lived my life for 30 years this one way. It's not easy to be on all the time. And as you said, if you throw in people who, maybe a little bit skeptical about it or don't want to make the effort, they're going to be even worse at it than somebody who is, scrupulous like me would be. So it's a tough situation, and there's no such thing as making a perfect bubble. You can have all the tests and precautions and guidelines you want, but it's down to human error at a certain point.
So, Sergio Garcia. Let's talk about Sergio Garcia and what Sergio had to say. So Sergio actually had reason to be concerned because he flew to the tournament. He gave Nick Watney a lift, essentially, on his private jet to the tournament and was asked about this and obviously the concern that he would have. He said, it's unbelievable. He's a good friend. He was very worried about me. He sent me several texts. He must have said sorry probably 25 times. I told him it was all good. Unfortunately, it had to happen to him. There's a lot of other people that probably deserved it a lot more than him, and he's the one that got it. Who are these other people that deserved it more than Nick Watney? I didn't realise that that's how this virus worked.
Tiger, Nick Faldo,
Harrington.
Harrington, yeah. No, so here's my good faith, my generous, charitable interpretation of what he said, which is that Nick Watney was, cautious, observed the protocols, et cetera, and by deserved, he meant that there were people who were not as good as Watney, who went out or who did things they shouldn't have, that were more likely to get it, and that Watney was just unlikely. So the crux of the statement is that word deserved. That's doing a lot of work there. And I think what he meant was not that they should get it because they're bad people and I'm rooting for them to get COVID-19. I think what he meant was that, that there were more people who, if you were going by the odds in their personal behavior, should have gotten it before Watney.
Yeah, not the best remark by Sergio Garcia. Just to finish up then, Shane, the breaking news this evening seems to be that the Ryder Cup is going to be postponed for a year. Both The Guardian and The Telegraph reporting this. We've spoken a lot about it with Padraig Harrington and Paul McGinley, and both of them, I think, felt the best thing was to leave it as long as possible. And certainly a period about a month ago when a lot of players were coming out against playing without fans, it looked like it was definitely off. In the last few weeks with the easing of restrictions, we thought it might happen, but it now seems it's definitely going to be postponed and pushed back until 2021. With all that's going on in America at the moment, it seems like the proper decision.
Yeah, I think so. I think it is. I actually spoke privately with Paul McGinley about this too, and he made some really good points about, maybe it's the kind of thing that should be played without fans, and even though the players don't like it, maybe it's the kind of thing that they should sort of sacrifice a little bit. But my feeling is different. First of all, I'm selfish. I'm writing a book about the 2020 Ryder Cup, and I really want it to be postponed. So I should be open about that because it's going to be very difficult to cover it this year. So I would like to push it back. But I think it's a good decision. I think the Ryder Cup, part of the atmosphere. I'm one of those people who agrees with Rory. I think the fans are a critical part of it, and it would be just strange to have it with no fans. And I think, there's going to be a second wave in the fall. I don't think it's a good idea, period. And so I'm over the moon. I want to believe it's true. This is the second time it's been reported. Ewan Murray's a great journalist and a really good guy. So I think I'm sure, dead to rights. But I'm still scared until I actually hear the words come from the PGA of America.
So you're writing a book on the 2020 Ryder Cup, but you just don't really fancy doing it this year.
Yeah, because look, I went to Hilton Head this past weekend. You can't talk to anybody.
Right.
How am I going? The Masters would be after it. You're not going to be able to get in-person interviews with any players, period, up until then. God knows what the media situation would be at this year's Ryder Cup. I mean, worst case scenario, they'd only give out a few credentials or something like that. It was all just lining up against me. The lead up, if you're writing a book, is just as important as the main event. So for me, a postponement, not the worst thing in the world if, cross your fingers and hope things are more open next year.
All right, Shane, well, hopefully the book goes well when it does eventually happen. Thanks as always for joining us.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.